when I was getting ready to go on the bench. I was pretty new. This was in January of 2000. And I was handling what we call a misdemeanor jail division. So there's three kinds of people in a misdemeanor jail division. There are those that have attached felonies who are not allowed out of custody. There are those that are too poor and they cannot afford to bond out of custody. But mostly it was people with serious mental illnesses that had no clue how to get out of custody. And at the time when I started as a judge in Florida, there was absolutely no training on how to identify people with mental illnesses, what to do with people with mental illnesses. My training went something like this, and it was from the judge whose division I took over. She said, Steve, if they act strange or bizarre, order a psychological evaluation. That was the extent of my knowledge. Pretty pejorative on top of it all. And so I'm getting ready to go on one morning, and the assistant public defender and the assistant state attorney came into my chambers and said, Judge, there is this amazing case that you're about to hear, and the defendant's parents are in court, and if it would be okay, we would really like you to speak with them. I'm like, sure, bring them in. Lovely couple came into my chambers, very sophisticated, obviously very well off, and very, very distraught. The mom was crying, the dad was shaking, and they literally began to beg me to get their son help. They told me that he was brilliant, he had gone to Harvard, he had a late onset of schizophrenia, and he was now cycling through the criminal justice system and homelessness, and they just didn't know what to do. And I think when you're a new judge, you think you have a lot more wisdom and a lot more power than you really do. And I made one of those major rookie mistakes, and I promised them that I would get their son help, because I work in logic like most of you do. And I knew that if you got arrested and you had a heart attack, we wouldn't let you lie on the floor and die. We would call 911, we would have you transferred, we would send you to an emergency room, and we would do everything to save you. And I thought, well, if you came into custody and you were psychotic, we wouldn't let you lie on a floor and die. We would send you to some kind of crisis unit and make sure that you got help. It turned out I was really wrong. And so I promised this poor couple that I would help their son. And as I started to go back into the courtroom, the mom stopped me and said, Judge, there's one more thing I need to tell you about my son. She said, not only is he brilliant, but respectfully, he probably knows more about the mental health system than you do. And I looked at her. I had no idea what she was trying to tell me, and apparently she thought the lawyers had told me more about the case than they had. And she said, oh, you see, my son, he's the former head of psychiatry at Jackson Memorial Hospital. She said he had a late onset of schizophrenia. He was having religious ideations. And so he cashed in his life insurance policy. He flew to Israel because he thought he needed to be closer to God. And we had no idea what had happened to him. 3 weeks later, the Israelis deported him back to Miami because he was running around naked in the Orthodox sections of Jerusalem, and for his own safety, they sent him home. And since he's been here, he has been cycling through homelessness and the criminal justice system, and we just don't know what to do. So I was pretty taken back. I went into the court, I called his case, and we started to have this amazing conversation. He was thoughtful, he was coherent, he was more respectful than the lawyers, and I'm thinking, hey, seems okay to me, except when you looked at him, he looked like a homeless man who hadn't bathed in months. And he kept insisting there was absolutely nothing wrong with him, that he had no type of mental health disorder, and if I would only release him, he would come back, he'd get evaluated, and I would see that there was nothing wrong, and it was ridiculous that I was keeping him in jail on such a ridiculous charge, which he was correct. I don't remember the exact charge, but I'm pretty sure it was the local county ordinance of possession of a dairy cart, which many homeless people with these illnesses would get picked up on. And it's not nefarious, because the police were under the same false impression that I was, and they thought out of compassion that if they arrested this population, that they would be able to get them help too, because they didn't know what else to do either. And so I said, can I ask you a question? He said, sure, Your Honor, anything. I said, I just don't understand one thing. You keep insisting that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. But if that's the case, why would a Harvard-educated psychiatrist be in jail, be homeless, and cycling through the criminal justice system. And all of a sudden, he got a look on his face that I will not forget to the day I die. It was a look of complete terror and fear. And all of a sudden, he started shaking back and forth, and he started cupping his ears, and he went into a full-blown psychotic episode. And he started screaming at the top of his lungs. And he started to point to the back of the courtroom where his parents were. And he started screaming in sixes, and he started screaming, Your Honor, Your Honor, Your Honor, you have to have the cup removed, you have to have the cup removed, you have to have the cup removed. I said to him, aren't those your parents? No, 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 no. Real parents, died. Holocaust. And they're here from the CIA, and they came to kill me. And the only thing that you could hear in that courtroom was his poor mother crying. And the only thing I knew to do was to order a psychological evaluation, which I immediately did. 3 weeks go by, 4 weeks, he's been in jail on possession of a dairy cart. The evaluation comes back, and it's great. It says that not only is he incompetent to stand trial, but he even meets Florida's ridiculously high standard for involuntary commitment. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to get this guy help. I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to fulfill the promise I made to his parents. At the time, we needed 3 evaluations to get what we call a stipulation or an agreement among the lawyers. So I ordered 2 more evaluations. Now he's in jail 10 to 12 weeks on possession of a dairy cart. And all 3 evaluations come back and they say the exact same thing. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I hand the evaluations to the lawyers. They immediately agree and stipulate that he is incompetent to stand trial, and I begin to order him into some kind of treatment. And I look down, and I notice that the assistant public defender has a little grin on her face. Now, I will tell you, as a former assistant public defender, this is a really bad sign. And then she utters those magic words that can set a judge off. Just ask Judge LeBlanc or Judge Lattimore. She says to me, Your Honor, in all due respect, because when a lawyer says that to a judge, it has nothing to do with respect, trust me. That's how they call us idiots without going to jail. She whips out a Florida Supreme Court opinion, and I had been sitting in civil, so of course I had not read it yet. And what did it say? It said, county court judges, of which I am, have no legal authority to involuntarily commit anybody, and my only option was to send this floridly psychotic man, eminently dangerous to self or others, back to the street. Exactly what he told me I needed to do 12 weeks earlier. We don't become judges, we don't become professionals. None of us go into this work to be part of that kind of problem, because that case was a window to everything that was wrong with our system. And as it turned out, I caused him to have that psychotic episode. How? He never told me that he was a Harvard-educated psychiatrist. And the one person he thought he could trust in that courtroom was the judge. And I violated that trust, and in his brilliant, fast mind, he concluded that I must have been part of the CIA conspiracy, because how else would I have known? Such hard lessons. I released him back to the street, as much as I hated to do so. And there's even a footnote in the Florida Supreme Court opinion. It says, we strongly urge the Florida legislature to fix this problem. How many people here think the problem has been fixed? So, the best part of being a judge is that when we invite people to meetings, they come. See, look at this. And as a result of his case, the first national meeting happened to be going on in Miami on this issue that year. I went, I begged them for some help, they gave us a grant, and I invited all the traditional and non-traditional stakeholders to a 2-day event where we mapped out the intersection between the criminal justice system and the community mental health system. And what did we find? We found that we were embarrassingly dysfunctional. That we were spending $2 million a year on misdemeanor psychological evaluations for competency so we could adjudicate people incompetent and release them back to the street floridly psychotic. I mean, who's more sick? Us so-called smart, sane, healthy policy people who have designed a system to fail perfectly that perfectly fails. But we follow the law. And so as a result of this small grant and this amazing summit, we had all the right people in the room. And you have many of the right people in the room right here. And what excites me so much about coming to Orlando, and one of the reasons I came, is you have an amazing state attorney, you have amazing judges, you have an amazing mayor, you have amazing sheriff, you have all the right people in the room to make the change. Because if we created this mess, we can fix this mess. It's not rocket science. I'm not a genius. Trust me. I'm just a judge who could bring the right people in the room to do the right thing. And that's what we started to do. And after mapping out the system that we realized just didn't work, we all turned to each other in the room and we asked ourselves who were more sick. And we came up with a two-part approach. And the first part is we looked around the country and we're like, how do we reduce the number of people with mental illnesses coming into our system? And then when they do come into our system, how do we create another system to make sure they get access to care? And so we look around the country, and at the time, this is 23 years ago, the Memphis Crisis Intervention Team Police Program was by far the best program. A 40-hour training program teaching law enforcement how to identify people in crisis, how to de-escalate the situation, and where to take people. Because we couldn't fix the problem on the other side. There were just too many people. This is Miami-Dade County. We're huge. At the time, we had over 118,000 arrests a year. Keep that number in mind. So we set up a pre-arrest and we set up a post-arrest. And what did we do? We put together a cooperative agreement, and I made everybody in that room come to my chambers and sign it like it was a valid contract. And to this day, don't tell them it's probably not. We didn't need a new law. We didn't need anything. And it turned out we didn't even need money right away because there were existing services like crisis stabilization units. One thing Florida actually has that most communities, believe it or not, don't. And so we had some capacity to start to divert people. Now, if I were to do this again, I would have had a three-part. And the third part you all have mentioned, and it's trauma. We didn't even have the studies when we started this about trauma 23 years ago. Those came out about 15 years ago. And so what we know is trauma is a major contributor to people with mental illnesses in this country. I heard one of the statistics before, and it was right on target. 92% of all the women in jail in the United States with mental illnesses have horrific histories of trauma, mostly sexual abuse. 75% of men who are in jail and prison in the United States with serious mental illnesses have horrific histories of trauma. Sometimes sexual abuse, more likely they are victims of domestic violence, or they are witnesses to violent crimes. Because trauma is not an emotional response, it is purely physiological. There is a permanent change of brain activity if you are exposed to too much trauma. And it takes a lot of treatment to help people get past it. And so what do we have in our jail system are a lot of victims who were never identified or treated, and we have allowed them to grow up into a criminal justice system. Now that doesn't mean we can just ignore it and kick them back to the street and expect them to get better. Because tragically, almost all of them that are in our system also have co-occurring problems, meaning that not only because they have a serious mental illness, they have an addiction issue because they're self-medicating themselves. And so we have to help people get treated. Look, we know what works. Because of our program, we reduced the number of arrests from 118,000 to 53,000. We cut our jail down from 7,400 to 4,400. We closed one of our three main jails at a savings so far to the county of $120 million. In our post-arrest diversion system, our recidivism among our misdemeanor population went from 75% to 20%. Our felony recidivism rate went from 75 to 6% for those that complete the program, which is the vast majority. But what we have found is there's still 20 to 30% of the population that are too sick for the existing system of care, not just in Miami, but everywhere in the United States. Because when community mental health was designed in the United States, it was designed for people with moderate mental illnesses because the most acutely ill were still in hospitals. And now that the hospitals are gone, we went to the war on drugs, we went to the war on crime, we massively cut back housing, we went to sentencing guidelines, we took this very sick population that got discharged from the hospitals because there are no state hospital beds left, basically. And we have pushed them into a criminal justice system. So we are about to open, it only took us 14 years, the first of its kind mental health diversion facility. And every large urban community is going to need one. This is a one-stop shop facility, 181,000 square feet, and I cannot thank my county enough for funding this. And it has every essential element of care in one location. It has a receiving facility, crisis stabilization unit, short-term residential facility, a day activity program that'll be run by people with lived experiences to teach self-sufficiency, a culinary supportive employment program, a GED, college education, almost there. It will have, it's good to be judge. I'm asking for 1 minute. I'm rapping, I promise. It has a courtroom so we can manage both criminal and civil cases. It gets better. It has a primary health clinic, a dental clinic, an eye clinic, a podiatry clinic. Because when I checked last, the head is connected to the rest of the body and we need to treat the whole body, not just the head. It also has tattoo removal because people that are under the influence and psychotic do silly things with tattoos, and it's hard to get a job when you have dirty words tattooed on your forehead. It also has a living room model for voluntary individuals that we can help engage into services. And finally, it has 208 beds of housing. So instead of just kicking people to the curb once we've adjudicated their case, that are the most acutely ill, that we see cycling every single day, that you see on your street cycling every single day, we will have a proper place to allow people to recover, to get their hopes and dreams back, and to get them back into the community. And then we will have the full continuity of care that all of us dream to have. But it is possible, and you can do it in Orlando. You can do it here because you have the leadership to do it. Not one person, not one party, not one institution created this problem, and not one person, party, or institution are going to fix it. This is a matter of collaborating, put our stupid, silly egos aside, getting rid of our silos, and fixing it for the people that need it most. Thank you all very, very much.